Greetings, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Realty Atlas podcast. My name is Fatih Susalis, and I'm the founder and CEO of Realty Atlas Properties here in the northern suburbs of Cape Town, specializing in property all around the greater Cape Town area. Been in the industry for around 25 years, and today I am going to be speaking to a professional who's been in the industry for almost 30 years in his profession as conveyancer in the northern suburbs. Jurgens Tubb from MHI Law has been doing business with me since I started, and he's an expert in his field. So he's going to guide us through the minefield that is legal work. So yeah, let's get started. Good afternoon, viewers of the Realty Atlas podcast. Welcome to episode 2, where we have our guest speaker, Jurgens Tubb from MHI Law in the northern suburbs. They're one of the bigger law firms in the area. I think I've known Jurgens for the good part of 24 years, I think. I have the honor of he's my personal attorney, but I also have the honor of actually calling him a friend. And I'm going to let him introduce himself a little bit, and we are also going to be switching to a little bit of Afrikaans at some point, I think. And just let's keep it real. Jurgens, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Forty, for having me on your podcast today. I started my career as a lawyer quite late in my life. I was about 30 when I started doing law. Before that, I was practicing estate administration and wills, etc. And on 30, I started my career in law, and I finished at about 35. And yes, here we are. Start building a practice in the northern suburbs and start sticking with good clients like yourself, building up a long relationship, because that is what we stand for. Our clients become friends, and that is what we want to reach. At the end of the day, that is something that we all strive to be, and I can sit proudly today with you and say this is what we did. And it's really a proud moment for me to be associated with yourself, with your company. They say choose your firms, your friends wisely.
So I think Jurgens, you attended Sheena and myself's wedding in January, and I think you turned around to me at one point and you said, "Foddy, are you going to be able to keep up at your 50th like you did at your 30th?" And the challenge was on. Needless to say, I couldn't walk the next morning, but I think I managed to keep that. I managed to succeed. So, viewers, just a little bit on this. We get a lot of solicitation from attorneys, people asking for business, and it's important that you have that relationship and attorneys that go that extra mile. So, one of the reasons that I've stuck with Jurgens was one of my first deals that I had was a gentleman that was buying his first house. And he was ready to buy. He'd been pre-qualified, and he put in his offer. He had his costs, and at the end of the day, because of past struggling with his credit record, he wasn't getting a full bond, and he needed the money, the costs to pay the deposit. And we were about to lose this deal. It was in a very, very difficult area that it was to sell. And I remember coming to you and going, "Jurgens, wat maak ons hierso?" And you were like, "Maklik. Sê vir hom, hy moet vir my afbetaal." And that man is still living in that house. We managed to get our first time buyer, and I think my commission on that at that time must have been, it was 23 years ago, it must have been about 15,000 rand at the time. It was a very low, but when it's one of the most emotional, because it was the first house. It was somebody that was moving from not owning a house to owning that. So I think that's brilliant. So I think, explain a little bit what a conveyancer does and how it works.
Yeah, Forty, I always said conveyancing is like building a puzzle. You got all sorts of pieces, but you need to get together, like rights clearance certificates, SARS, transfer duty receipt, homeowners association, seller must sign, purchaser must sign, and so I can go on. All your pieces you must get together, and the moment that you got all the pieces in the line, you then lodge your documents in the deeds office. And the important part of this is the pieces of a puzzle you need to get as soon as possible, and for that you need to rely on other people to do their work to enable you to do your work. And that is sometimes not so easy, because if there is somebody that is ill at the local authority or at the homeowners association, you wait and you must phone again. Yeah, ironically, I many times said in my next job, I don't want to be dependent on other people to do their work for me to enable me to do my ones. But nevertheless, here I am, and so the building the puzzle is the best, I think, describe our whole process. Also, many people ask me a lot of times, but why is the system so strict? Why is there so many links in the system? And my best explanation what I can give for that is, when you, in the deeds office, it states that Fortis Osalis is the owner of property number 1 Bellville, you can rely on that 99.9%. So all those hoops that you need to get over make the system not foolproof, because there's always room for mistakes, but at the end of the day, you can rely on the info. And that is the biggest advantage of a system like this. In the deeds office, for example, you've got 2 sets of people that go through all your deeds, that check it, ID numbers, name spelling. If a name is wrong spelled, they reject it. So they check it very thoroughly, and if you make a mistake, you need to fix the mistake before you can proceed. So in many other countries, it's not so strict. Like, for example, in England, it is in front of a notary that you sign the documents, there's no deeds office, etc. Okay, so the moment there is a mistake, it needs to be fixed before you can relodge your documents. And that is in many instances, if conveyancers is not doing their work properly and make sure that all the stuff is correct, there is what we call the rejection. And this is a word that is most hated in my office, simply because it got an influence on so many people, the seller, the purchaser, the agent. Everyone now wants explanations from you. So yeah, I think all in all, a quite long system, take about 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes more for a registration to go through, but there is advantages to this.
And I think one of the reasons that I use you more than anything else is that I have my own dedicated conveyancing secretary. I've got her mobile number. I know we needed some documents over a weekend, and she got it signed. And it's that ability, I think, also where you have it's not about the agent just signing the deal and then handing it over to the conveyancer and saying, hey, here, please get it through. It's also about that communication between the conveyancers and the agent, because in a situation where somebody's flying out overseas, you've got to put a power of attorney in place. Otherwise, if they fly out and they have to get stuff signed, it's got to go to Australia, it's got to go to the consulate or the ambassador to be stampled and stuff like that. And then obviously in situations like the Homeowners Association, I know in the past that myself and my team have gone to get signatures, which to assist to get the thing through. But it is a very arduous process. So do you have a funny story of something that's happened, or can you share a little anecdote of something interesting that has given you a lesson in this industry? And we will not talk about the master's office today, eh?
Yeah, let's not talk about that. There's a lot of stories, but I think for me, helping people to live their dream is one of the most important things that I love my job for, and that I will do always the extra mile to reach that. And I mean, so many times, like you said, I'm a deal maker and not a deal breaker. And the whole thing for me is, at the end of the day, if I go and sleep at night, I want to know I did something for somebody today that improved their life, their experience. Yeah, there is a lot of funny stories as well. I mean, in all jobs there's funny stories, but for me, it's important to focus on what I can do to, especially my staff as well, what I can do to solve problems, what I can do at the end of the day to make the deal work and get it registered and to have a happy client and happy agents, etc.
Absolutely. So if you had a young family that was looking to buy a house, so obviously it's their first home or the flat, and you would obviously give them good advice to call myself to help them find something. If it was a seller, you'd give them good advice to use me again, and I appreciate that. But if you were to, so we know the financing side, we'll get to that. But from the conveyancing side, what would you recommend to, first of all, buyers and then sellers to get in order so that there is a smooth transaction going forward?
I think for the most important is their cooperation. When you ask them something, they need to act swiftly so that we've got all outstanding information. Sometimes people is just because of the fact that we all need to FICA, for example, people. A lot of clients don't understand why I already gave all this information to the agent, why you also want it now. Unfortunately, in terms of FICA legislation, you need to FICA, I need to FICA, the bond originator need to FICA, the whole system, everyone must FICA. And that is sometimes a huge frustration, and people will, when they get a phone call and tell them, listen, here's a list of 10 things that I need from you, they already on that moment, why? I already give it to 40, why must I do it again? And when we explained and when they sent it at the end of the day, but I mean, the moment that people realize, the sooner they send all the information, and a lot of it is garbage in, garbage out. I know that. But for us, we need to also tick the boxes, and if you don't tick the boxes, then we are in trouble. So cooperation from day one, supply from a buyer and a seller, supply the information swiftly, smoothly, and when there is a problem, like for example after registration, it is sometimes a big frustration for all of us, is the leaking roofs, the toilet that is leaking, the crack in that wall. That is also things that already the property condition report that is also introduced by the new property board that help a lot to eliminate that. But at the end of the day, in that instance, we also need clear instructions from everybody so that we can convey that instructions, because again, we just don't turn our back the moment there is a dispute. We try to sort it out. Sometimes we're lucky and we sort it out. I would say in most instances we sort it out, but there is instances that I need to tell a buyer or purchaser, listen, you have to get independent legal advice, because, for example, there is a thing that they say here is a latent defect, that a roof is costing 200,000 rand and I want the seller to replace that. The seller not going to easily agree to that, and then you need sometimes independent legal advice for a person like that, so that they can get advice and not necessary, because us as conveyancing is like a referee. I play the game according to certain rules, and I have to look after both the seller and the purchaser. There was a thinking that no, the conveyancer is only there for a seller, but at the end of the day, I receive the purchaser's money. I've got a fiduciary obligation to whatever I do with that purchaser's money. I need to do that in a proper and in a proper manner, so that people can't come back to me and say, what do you do with this money? Why was it not invested, for example? If you don't invest the money, there's no interest. The money lay 2, 3, 4 million lay in my trust account for 2 months. This is a lot of interest. And when people ask you questions, they say, where's my interest? So, yeah, that we need to get all in place to make sure that the transaction is smooth, and to look after the seller and purchaser, so that at the end of the day, they're both satisfied. And I think it's exactly what you as a property professional also want to do. because today's purchasers is tomorrow's sellers.
Yes.
And one have to give recognition to that, because if you don't realize that, you can have a lot of purchasers that is cross with you and say, I will never use you in future, and that you don't want.
Yes. So I think something that I realized, obviously, before the mandatory disclosure, which is a very, very nice introduction. I think it does that. But I think transparency and honesty is very, very important, because if an agent tries to sell it, and I think the problem where a lot of our property practitioners and our property professionals, they live commission only, and they're trying to get the deal through, and sometimes they might not disclose, or the seller wants to get the most for his house, so he doesn't disclose it to the agent. And something like that, if it is revealed later, can end up costing you much more, and getting involved in a legal battle. I've always said, if you can't settle it, it's going to cost. It's not only going to cost you; it's going to cost the only person making money out of something like that is an attorney. So disclose the fact that if the roof is leaking or something needs to be done, and if it's going to cost you 30 or 40,000 rand to fix it, and disclose it, or 50,000 rand, or you can't fix it and you need to get it off the purchase price, it could cost you less than litigation later. So I think, and yeah, what effect has the what's it called, the protection, what's it?
CPA.
The CPA, the Consumer Protection Act, that was brought on a couple of years ago. Has that had a profound impact on people's buying skill, comfort in buying? Sorry, the comfort in buying. Do you think that that's had an effect? So yeah, your thoughts on that?
The only place where it has a huge effect is with developers, for example. In other words, people that sell property in the normal course of business. Your once-off seller, the CPA is not applicable to them. There was big confusion in the beginning, and everybody think that now voetstoets is not anymore applicable. Voetstoets is very much applicable. Only with people, it's not applicable if people can't rely on that if you are doing business and building houses in your normal course of business. Then you are trumped by the act. And you need then to make sure that you comply. And also on your comment about the property condition report, the attention is in the detail, and that tick boxes is not nice, because it's yes, no, not applicable. It's like a medical form that you need to complete when you want a policy. People don't like it. People don't, as a normal rule, people don't like admin. And to fill in these forms feel... Het jy al ooit dit gehad, het jy al ooit dat gehad, en dan maak hulle sommer net crisis en hulle worry nie. And when you passed away and the insurance company refused to pay out because you did not disclose a condition that you had at the time, and exactly the same with property. You run through that and you just tick, and you don't concentrate and you don't focus, and the agent also sometimes don't help you to focus, because they say, don't worry, man, I will just tick it, it's fine. And when you end up in a situation that there is a problem, there is a roof leaking, etc., and backwards and forwards, and it uses a lot of time. It's a lot of time-consuming and very emotional to a certain extent. And I think that is what sellers and purchasers needs to understand. The house transaction is a stressful thing. And if you realize that, you will deal with it and make sure that you spend the necessary time on that, and not just, okay, it will happen, because there is repercussions, there is complications if you do things that you're not supposed to do, if you don't tick a box that you're not supposed to do. And then at the end, the lawyers must, as you correctly point out, the lawyers must now sort it out. And it's money, it's time, it's negative energy, and it doesn't do good for anyone.
It doesn't. So I remember when I started, I think a OTP, an offer to purchase, I think was 4 pages, and that was including the information sheet. And it's amazing now. I think I'm sitting on 9 pages, and that's by making my font slightly smaller. Otherwise, I could be sitting on 12. And then you've got your mandatory disclosure form that is 4 pages. You've got your FICA that you need to do. You need your POPIA disclosure. It's getting more arduous and arduous. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think you are right that it is the most emotional transaction, isn't it? I think it's close to losing a loved one, that selling. And then obviously the reasons for selling are also big motivating factors, you know. So Jurgens, obviously budget is important when buying. What costs are generally involved in the purchase of a property?
For the seller, there is your bond cancellation costs. There is your rates and taxes that must be paid in advance. Then you will recover a small part of that, or whatever the case, depending on how the local authority works, you will recover that from the purchaser. So that is mainly your cost, and the state property professional commission.
Yes.
So that is basically for the seller's account. Your purchaser, on your seller side, also your Beetle electrical and plumbing certificate, also pay that. On your purchaser side, it's basically your transfer cost, your bond cost. And there's also very important to make a clear distinction between bond cost and transfer cost, because people get confused. And people will say you, but the transfer cost is this, and when they come at certain stage when we forward the accounts to them and said, but I wasn't aware of this bond cost. So people must clearly understand, if you go and buy a property cash, it's only transfer costs. But if you go and buy a property by way of finance through a bank, you at the end of the day need to pay bond costs as well. And so the two together, for the purchaser side, and then the small part of rates and taxes that needs to be paid, depending on, as I said, on the local authorities' rules.
So I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here. There's a question in the preparation here. So what are your thoughts on the Expropriation of Land Act that has recently come to the fore? Do you share the belief that we need to be worried that foreigners are going to stop investing? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I was already on the receive end of that. One of the purchasers of my clients were in Hermanus withdrawal from the sale due to this. Whether or not if there's enough grounds for this, time will tell. But my thoughts on this is the old act was sufficient. In other words, they make provision for this, for expropriation. The new Act's promulgation is only politics. It's nothing else than politics. Somewhere they need to show that they do something for the people.
Yes, because it's quite the flow on that is quite crazy, because you've got banks involved. So what if there's a bond on the property and stuff like that? And I think one of the things that I think is the hijacked buildings in towns where there's illegal people staying there, or land that can be used better, that owners have disappeared. In areas like that, I think they can look at that. But, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, my belief is, and I just go back to normal things, is that a country needs to run, and one of the things that it needs to run is an economy. And if you take away somebody's basic right to own a home and it could be lost, I think people are going to leave in droves, and there'll be no one to politic. You know, that's my view. I don't think it's naive, but I think it can be quite realistic. So Jurgens, let's. One other little topic maybe. So how binding is an offer to purchase? So is it can people walk away, and what are the pitfalls and advice that you would need to look at for it to fall away?
Yeah, as a lawyer, it is for sure a binding thing, but there's always a but. The thing is just, there's a reason why, for example, if you got a cash buyer, there's a reason why you ask for a deposit. Because the moment that the deposit for 10% or whatever the case it is land in the bank, you know, listen, this is a serious buyer. But the fact of the matter is, if a buyer buys and cash, and you don't ask for a deposit, you don't ask for guarantees, and the buyer after 2 months said, listen, I'm going to walk away. Then your seller got two options. He can either accept the cancellation or he must now claim specific fulfillment. In my career of for nearly 50 years, I never, ever advise a client to go for specific performance. It is just very difficult, long, expensive. Litigation is very expensive. And to do that, at the end of the day, rather spend that energy and get a new buyer and keep your old buyer responsible for damages, whatever it is. But to try and ask for specific fulfillment is problematic because of the costs. So yes, it's binding, but there is certain things that give comfort. For example, a deposit. For example, a guarantee. And until such time, you will even get people that say, a seller would say, I will only believe that this is true the day that the money lands in my bank account. But I, at the end of the day, need to protect the seller. We need to protect the buyer if he pays us the money. So I will, in all instances that I act on behalf of, especially for the preparation of a deed of sale for a seller, try to get a deposit as soon as possible in the bank, and a decent deposit of at least 10%, so that we then make sure, if you walk away, there is money. Yes. But again, not for specific fulfillment, just then to claim your damages, and there is money to get your damages from that from the deposit.
And an interesting one. This has been a talking point among sometimes when I do a deal. What are your thoughts on early occupation? Would you give it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, good question. For the occupation, sellers that insist on occupation on registration make conveyancers old, because a deeds office is not a button that you press. As I explained right at the start, it's building a puzzle. So for me now to aim for a specific date with all the surrounding circumstances, and I don't get it right, and that on that specific day is you need to arrange your truck removal truck. You need to arrange people to help you to clean houses, etc. So now a seller will phone you up 2 days before occupation, before the date was planned for registration, and he asks you, are you okay? Is it on schedule? I said, no, I think we've gone a week late, we wait for this or what. No, I'm not going to allow a purchaser in my house before registration. Now we need to negotiate. Yes. And at the end of the day, as I said, the deeds office is not a button, and the truck is already hired. We got a specific date that we need to load, and we got a specific date that we need to offload, and then the big pressure start. And yes, so I understand why there is sellers that say I only allow a purchaser in my house on occupation, on registration, but there is very difficult circumstances to do so. You create a lot of tension. A lot of things can go wrong. The conveyancer must now plan accordingly. And as I said, it's not always so easy to plan to a specific date. So my answer to you is, I understand why sellers do so, but it's not practical in what we do each and every day. There is a lot of circumstances that influence that. And what I do, for example, I would, you sign your deed of sale, you sign your property condition report. The day that this purchaser got occupation, you sign another document. But you again confirm, I walk through this property and it is in the same condition which it was on the date of signature of a deed of sale. And that helped a lot again, so that the guy then sign again, and he must walk properly. He must do his walkabouts around the house, do whatever he need to do, but he must sign that document again. And that with that specific little bit of protection, I don't experience a lot of problems. There is now then, but I mean, this is what it is, and we need to work around that, but this is my answer to you.
Yeah, I also think that it's also on the status of the offer to purchase, isn't it? Because you want to go to a point of no return, don't you? So, for example, I know that and I learned the hard way I think it was about 20 years ago, where we gave occupation to somebody and then they refused to pay and the money didn't come through and they were in the house and it took them 7 months to get out. I hadn't closed the deal.
Yeah.
It was a share deal. I think you were
Yeah.
you were the conveyancer on it.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I wasn't the agent at the time, but because we'd had a dual mandate, I was privy to the seller calling me all the time and saying what I can do. So I learned very early on in my career what early occupation can do. So I think we've worked together in our offer to purchase. We have all documents need to be signed, all fees need to be paid, all guarantees need to be issued, so that it is actually at a point of no return. And I think signing that document is definitely one that allows you to do that. So I think in closing, I think I'm just gonna.
On your closing part, just look a lot at the camera also for you, okay?
Okay.
And remember to tell people to subscribe.
Yes. So one last question. Okay. So one last question, I think, and then we can wrap up. Municipal accounts. Okay. So obviously we know that times are tough, and in a situation where some people have maybe got arrear municipal accounts. What is the situation on that? I mean, how do you mitigate if they don't have the money and the money needs to be paid and you can't get the rates clearance? How would you get a rates clearance? And then also, if you could just answer that, I think it will help.
Rates clearance certificates, what is one of the pieces of a puzzle, as I explained. So we need to get that, and now you get a rates clearance. Sometimes the seller will warn you, otherwise they don't even warn you. You just ask for the figures, and here is 100,000 rand now payable to get the rates clearance certificate. You have then two options. You can ask the seller, listen, pay me the money, I need to get the rates clearance certificate, or you need to breach that. Now, a lot of sellers will say, listen, I don't have the money to pay this amount. I know I'm in arrears. What can you do? And we will say, listen, we arrange bridging finance for you so that we can pay that. But then you must make sure that there is enough profit on date of registration that is available for all your liabilities. So liabilities for all your estate agent commission, cancellation of your existing bond. Because if there's not enough money, you need to approach the bank and ask, can you register with a shortfall? As far as that is concerned, a rates clearance certificate is part of our job. The purchasers can rest assured that all rates and taxes needs to be paid in full before we can give transfer. Earlier, many years ago, when there was a lot of more trust in people, they accept undertakings. Some local authorities accept undertakings. That is not the case anymore. So you need to pay, and you need to pay that with bridging, and it is sometimes expensive because bridging is not the cheapest money that you can get, but unfortunately this is the only source of funds that you can get to pay that. A normal ABSA or Standard Bank will not help you as quick as what our bridging companies help us. So we make use of that, and when you pay, and so the taxes is paid in full, and the rates clearance certificate is issued, and everyone is protected.
Okay. And then I'm going to do one last question, and I think this is quite relevant because with 20 years of experience, and is it now nearly 30 years, plus, yes. With more than nearly 30 years of experience, what do you think the market's going to do in the next couple of months? I mean, I'm sure you get this at Bry's and functions and stuff, but what is your outlook over the next 3 months, over the next year? What do you think is going to happen in the South African property market?
The migration to Cape Town help us a lot, especially our seaside towns like St. Helena Bay. I think St. Helena Bay was the third preferred most building plans was lodged in that specific local authority. I think Mosselbaai was number one. So there's a big influx of people from Gauteng and the other provinces to Cape Town, especially on your towns like St. Helena Bay. Very nice, but you are able to buy relative cheap plots and relative cheap building costs. On your question, what do I expect of a property market? I would say it depends on the interest rates. And I was of opinion that we're going to see at least another 2-3 interest reduction. Now inflation is from 3.3% up to 3.2%. And our governor of the Reserve Bank, he's only know one medicine for this, and that is interest rates stay the same or put it up. So that is not the thing. I really hope I'm wrong. I really hope I see something that I'm not supposed to, or I see something that I wasn't supposed to see. But the fact of the matter is, I think with the uncertainty in our government of national unity and the budget, etc., that doesn't help a lot. So we really sit in situations that I don't know what the economy is going to do. We know everybody shout growth, growth. We need growth in the economy. We need to grow, and we must create jobs. We all know that, but up to now, the ANC government wasn't very successful in putting budget in place would help us. Maybe our finance minister, Trevor Manuel, he was one of the best at that stage, getting that right. But that is a fine line between the two, because you don't want to put up taxes, but at the end of the day, you also need to stimulate the economy. And as I said, interest rates is the big thing. And if I've got my way, I want to see at least 2 to 3 interest reductions. But yeah, with the inflation, I don't know, and I think we're going into very troubled waters for next month, for 3, maybe up to the end of this year, because it is just too many uncertainties. And economies don't like uncertainty. No country's economy like uncertainties.
I think that's a fair comment. I think the interest rates have definitely stimulated the market a little bit. I think I've seen movement on flats, and I've seen investors starting to come back, which is good. But I definitely think the sentiment is not where it needs to be. So if any finance minister is watching this podcast, please drop the interest rate so we can get the property market stimulated. Jurgens, I want to thank you for being here and the insights that you've given. I remember the day you walked in to the offices that time with a cake, and where we've gone from there, and I look forward to doing the deals. And I want to thank you for always, having our back and our clients' back, and ensuring, that you are down the line, and you do look after the best interests of both your clients. So I really want to thank you for being part of this podcast. My first interview, so it was fitting that you are my guest. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Jurgens.
Thank you, Forty.
So I just want to remind you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and thank you for watching. And I hope you learned something. And if you have ideas, please DM me if there's anything that you'd like us to discuss. Or if you like to use Jurgens, let me know and I will send you his details. Thank you so much. Just to mention, you also do late estates. That's your speciality, and conveyancing. And then you have a litigation department as well. Yes. at MHI. And bond department. You're on all the panels. Yes. So they do offer full service in terms of when it comes to that, and they have good service providers, and
and good clients.
And good clients, yes. Thank you so much, everybody.